So to start again, here we are. What do you know about how government policies influence human populations? I want to tell you a story about a woman. After 4 gruesome abortions, she chose to have her third child. The only problem in this story was that this woman did live in China. Government policies in the US, like Roe versus Wade, were currently overturned. And we can definitely all relate to that. I'm definitely not a politician, but I am a mother. So we will be looking at the timeline comparison of China's population policy, and we will begin by looking at the origin of the policy. So the one-child policy originated in 1978. Came about in 3 different stages. So the policy first was established 1979. It did change a little bit in 2016, only to allow a little bit more growth for population. It allows some families to have a second child, and then it allowed families to have a third child just last year in May of 2021. Why was the policy established? So mainly because there was a famine right before it was instituted. So there was food resources that were minimal and there was too many mouths to feed. So it was an issue and the government put it out as a resolution. So the year 1979 is right between these 2 little bars here. So we have 520 million in 1949 and 969 million in 1980 for the China's population by the millions. This is kind of the comparison of the population growth. So the population growth rate increase did have some consequences. So breaking that policy did allow you to have some fines that you did have to pay. So initially what would happen is you would get a one-child certificate, which was a pledge. And it's basically so you wouldn't break the pledge and you would stick to just having 1 kid. Now, the consequence in that is they would give you an allowance, they give you a child allowance. But if they figured out you got another kid, they would take that allowance away, equivalent to the amount that they gave you. So if they've been giving you money for years, they basically would have to take that money back. One of the benefits of following that policy is that, again, that's child allowance, but it was only effective until the child reached 14 years of age. And some ethnic minorities did have an advantage in this policy because they were allowed to have kids because they were ethnic minorities. Other than that, in order to have a second child for that particular case, you did have to have a girl initially. Another effect of the population is the amount of abandoned children and the high amount of abortions. So a Black child, and this is some propaganda here, Chinese propaganda on the left. So Black child meant that you were by definition an undocumented child. So you, as a consequence, were unregistered with government. You were unable to marry, you were unable to travel, and you were unable to attend school. For this particular policy where there's less population, what you would see is the government was less lenient about having that 1 extra kid that they kind of ignored. But other than that, we also look at the elderly population and how that was affected. Now that's broken down into 2 separate parts. So the first part is the 4-2-1 pyramid, which is basically the structure in your family. So every family consists of 1 only child plus the 2 mother and father plus the grandfathers, grandmothers. So 4 at the top, 2 for the parents, and then 1 at the bottom. So what that meant over time, and the comparison is made here with the 2 charts, you see the chart that's 2010 and then the chart that's 2050. So most of the population in the earlier one, the 2010, is at the bottom, and then the population skips over to the very top where you see more elderly people account for the total population of China's community. And there is a concern for minimal support from the working class. So more elderly means less people working, less people working, the less funds the older generation have. Now, I do want to demonstrate what this means on a bigger scale. So this is China's total fertility rate. So this is the rate of the amount, the average of women that are actually able to have kids. So this is for women that are between the ages of 15 and 49. And you can see that that slope goes up higher around the dates when they instituted the policy. And then it swoops down all the way to the second time when it gets modified. And then it just kind of stagnates at the bottom in the B spot. So overall population growth percentage is the same. So now that we've discussed the bigger picture, I would like to take a quick recap. So initially, the one-child policy was intended to slow down population growth after famine hit China and resources were limited. The policy remained in effect long after, and the effects remain active today. Now, going back to the overturn of Roe and Wade that I initially talked about, since the changes for that policy were handed off to individual states, each state will determine the qualities needed included in their policy. There is a substantial amount of heated debate on both sides, and I personally believe that we must decide what kind of change we want. At the beginning of my speech, I did tell you a story about a woman who was forced to have 4 abortions. Have you really considered the long-term effects of population control? Today, we have looked at substantial changes caused by the one-child policy, but how do we provide wealth to the cultural identity or the cultural identity around us? In conclusion, I do believe we have a lot to learn from historical policies, and hopefully my presentation has served to inform you about the long-term effects on population. Yay! That was a little bit over 10 minutes, but it's okay, I don't care. Over here. Babe, you're gonna have to tell me how to stop it. Right there.